Okay, good morning. Welcome to the October 15th, 2020 council meeting for the Township of Algonquin Highlands. I will call the meeting to order, and I have one agenda change. There's been a modification. The item in the closed session has been removed pending further information, and I'll ask the clerk for a roll call first. She's waving her finger at me.
Councillor Shortreed.
Present.
Councillor Dayu.
Here.
Councillor Barry.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I'm here.
And Mayor Moffat.
I am also here, apparently. I will look for an approval of the agenda. I'll just repeat that the closed item has been removed pending some further information that's needed for that discussion. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda? Deputy Mayor Danielson, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that the October 15th, 2020 regular council meeting agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, adoption of the previous minutes. May I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be resolved that the October 1st, 2020 regular council meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Public meetings, there are none. Delegations, we have one, and for our asset management plan, we'll bring in Peter Simcisco from Watson and Associates. Good morning, Mr. Simcisco.
Hi, good morning.
Your volume is very low. Is that on our end or your end?
So let me try. Is this better?
Oh, that's much better. There you are.
All right, I'll make sure I'll speak to the microphone. It's just I'll try to be cognizant of that.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome. This is a much-awaited plan, and I think you know that we're pretty disappointed with the delay. That's been many months delayed, even prior to COVID, and it subsequently has delayed a number of our conversations and capital project discussions. So I think it's important that I know there are challenges with every big project, but this project is almost 2 years late. So there's no discussion on that. I just wanted to let you know on behalf of council and staff that we acknowledge the delay as well, and look forward to moving on with that.
Absolutely.
So if you'd like to take us through, I understand you need 20 to 30 minutes to walk us through this. So if you'd like to take the helm, you go right ahead.
Will do. Thank you. So first of all, good morning, everyone, and I'm certainly pleased to be here, at least virtually today, to present the asset management plan that we were retained to prepare for the township. And council may recall that I did a presentation, would have been last October, to provide some context within the undertaking and to introduce some of the basic concepts in asset management planning. And I recognize that it has been a fairly long journey since then, primarily caused by some unexpected delays with the on-the-ground work that was required to complete the condition assessments of the township's assets. And I certainly know that staff have been hoping to bring the final plan forward to council for some time. And so I'm glad that we are finally able to do that today. So before I get going, I would like to thank staff for all of the input that they provided throughout the process, their assistance with compiling various background information, as well as their participation in the various meetings that were undertaken throughout the development of the plan. Now, in terms of the structure of this presentation or overview of the asset management plan, I do understand that council has been provided with a copy of the report. And so in light of that, I will provide a fairly high-level summary focusing on the main elements that comprise the plan, as well as the findings. The report is organized into 5 main chapters. And so I'll briefly start with the introduction, which provides some general high-level background and summarizes the legislative context for the undertaking. I think it's worth highlighting here that one of the drivers behind undertaking this plan is that the province introduced Regulation 58817 back in 2018, which requires municipalities to prepare asset management plans. And while the province took a phased approach with the regulation, the township's asset management plan has been prepared to meet the requirements of the final phase, which technically isn't required until July 1st, 2024. I also think it's important to note that while this plan meets those regulatory requirements, it needs to be recognized that asset management isn't just this plan itself. It is a practice and a journey that will continue for years to come. Now, one of the requirements of Regulation 58817 is that Council reviews on an annual basis the municipality's progress in implementing the asset management plan, any factors that may be impeding the municipality's ability to implement the plan, and a strategy to address those impeding factors. So that's one of the ways that asset management planning will be brought forward on at least an annual basis to Council's attention. So the asset management plan covers all of the tangible assets managed by the township. And at a high level, these can be grouped into roads, bridges and culverts, facilities, and vehicles and equipment. And together, these assets have a current replacement value of approximately $70 million, which works out to around $29,000 per capita. So fairly substantial amount of investment that has been made into these assets providing services. The most significant asset grouped by replacement value are the roads, which represent approximately 49% of the replacement value, followed by facilities, which represent approximately 28% of the replacement value, and then fleet at approximately 9% of the total, equipment at 8% of the total, and finally the bridges at about 6% of the total replacement value. The replacement values of each asset category are detailed in Chapter 2 of the Asset Management Plan. And within each subsection, there's more detail provided on how the replacement values break down by different subcategories of the assets, for example, by surface type for the roads, by department for facilities, and so on. Moving beyond the basic summaries of the assets and their replacement values, Chapter 2 of the Asset Management Plan also introduces two very important and closely related elements, and that is the asset condition and levels of service. In order to facilitate good asset management planning, it is generally recognized as best practice to undertake condition assessments of the assets. And the township recognized this in the way that this project was scoped, and we brought Dillon Consulting on the team to undertake a comprehensive condition assessment of the township's roads. And the Dillon team also completed detailed condition assessments of a number of the township's facilities. The various facility assets were assessed at different levels with very detailed component level assessments done for facilities comprising about 72% of the total replacement value of the facilities portfolio. Higher level assessments completed for facilities comprising about 19% of the replacement value, and then no sort of explicit condition assessment was completed for the generally minor facility assets comprising approximately 12% of the total replacement value. The bridges and the culvert were not assessed as part of this project because the township already has condition information from the inspection reports that have to be completed every 2 years. And then also for the vehicles and equipment, those assets were not explicitly assessed for condition, and instead their condition state was approximated by looking at the individual asset's age relative to its expected useful life. So with that said, the condition state of the individual assets and then of the asset portfolio overall gives us an indication of the level of service that is being provided by these various assets. So for roads, the level of service is primarily measured by the pavement condition index, and section 2.2.2 of the asset management plan, which is page 2-5 or page 26 of the council agenda package, provides pictures that illustrate the different condition states of the road assets. The average condition state of the township's roads was found to be good, with an average pavement condition index of 61.5. This is, however, getting towards the bottom of the good range and approaching the fair category. The level of service target for the road network overall was set as an average condition state of good, which would be within the 70 to 55 range of the pavement condition index values, and would basically maintain the current overall condition of that road network. Now, in addition to the average pavement condition index, it was felt important to consider the proportion of the road network falling below a minimum acceptable threshold, or a pavement condition index of 50. So currently, based on the condition assessment that was undertaken, there are just over 12 kilometers of roads, which comprises about 16% of the total, falling below this threshold. And in terms of a proposed level of service target, the goal would be to work towards having no roads falling below this threshold. For the bridges, the level of service is primarily measured in two ways, with the bridge condition index on the one hand, and on the other hand, by looking at the number of bridges that have loading or dimensional restrictions. The average bridge condition index across the 5 structures, so those would be 4 bridges and 1 major culvert, is 72.2, which would fall into the good category. And additionally, one of the township's bridges currently has load restrictions, but as noted in the asset management plan, this is a design limitation, not a result of the structure's condition. And so I think that is an important distinction to make in that regard. The level of service target for the township's bridges was set as an average bridge condition index of no less than 70, which is the bottom of the good category, and no individual structures falling into the poor category, which would be a bridge condition index of less than 60. And so both of these targets are currently being met, and so the plan would be to maintain that into the future as well. So for facilities, the level of service is primarily measured by the assessed condition of the assets. And 2 things of note here are that there's a wide variety of assets that fall into the facility category, ranging from buildings such as the administrative office, through the docks and landings, and also including more minor structures such as gazebos at parks and storage. And secondly, it is important to note that there is no prescribed level of service measure for these facility assets. And that's in contrast to the requirements for what have been defined as core infrastructure assets in the regulation, which would include the roads and bridges. The average condition of facility assets was found to be good. However, there were a number of facility components that were found to be in the poor and very poor condition states. The replacement value of these components that would fall into the poor and very poor categories totals approximately $1.5 million, and that represents about 7.4% of the total replacement value of facilities. In terms of setting a level of service target, no specific value has been established at this point. Rather, the objective was established as seeking to minimize or potentially fully eliminate the facility components falling into the poor and very poor condition states over time. So next, in terms of the vehicles, so there are about 40 vehicles that are utilized by the township in the delivery of services to the public, and those include fire trucks and heavy public works trucks, as well as various pickup trucks, just to provide some examples. And from the level of service perspective, it is important for these assets to be replaced before they become unreliable or too costly to maintain and repair. As mentioned earlier, the condition of the vehicles was not explicitly assessed, and instead it was approximated by looking at the age of each vehicle relative to its life expectancy. And it is assumed that the life expectancy that was identified for each individual vehicle reflects its frequency as well as its intensity of use. In other words, if we have, for example, 2 pickup trucks that are the same, but one gets used around the clock 7 days a week and the other sits idle most of the time, then the former would have a shorter life expectancy based on the service demands that are placed on it. And so using this proxy for condition tells us how close or how far beyond individual vehicles are relative to their life expectancy. And vehicles that are currently at more than 140% of their expected useful life have been assigned into a replace category, indicating that even though they are still in service today, replacement is likely going to be required in the short term. There's only one vehicle currently falling into this particular category. However, there's also about $2 million worth of vehicles, or approximately a third of the replacement value, that are between 90 and 140% of their life expectancy and fall into the fair category. And again, while these assets are still in service today, replacement may be needed in the short to medium term. The final asset category is equipment, and this category contains a very wide variety of assets ranging from fuel tanks at the airport, for example, to relatively minor equipment, which typically would be pooled because individually the items would not meet capitalization thresholds. And for equipment, the way we look at the levels of service is very similar to what was described for the vehicles, with the main objectives being ensuring reliability and minimizing operating costs by replacing these assets at the appropriate time. So approximately 12% of the equipment that is currently in service, as measured by replacement value, is beyond 140% of its typical life expectancy. And so replacement would be expected to be needed in the very short term. So having summarized the asset condition, as well as the current level of service and the level of service targets that have been set out in the asset management plan, we can turn our attention to the lifecycle management strategies, which are detailed in Chapter 3 of the plan. And this is a fairly technical chapter, and I don't think we need to go into a great amount of detail, but it is important to highlight how the lifecycle management strategies were developed and what the outputs of that work tell us. So the main objective of defining the lifecycle management strategies is to identify the lifecycle activities that need to be performed on these assets to ensure that they continue to support service provision. So for roads, bridges, and facilities, the lifecycle management strategies encompass activities that look beyond just a straight replacement of the asset to properly account for all of the lifecycle costs related to the asset. And I'll first use the example of roads, where typically there are a number of intermediate lifecycle activities, namely different types and multiple rounds of surface treatment before the asset is effectively replaced. And this replacement, in the case of roads, would involve removing and pulverizing the existing surface, performing repairs to the road base as required, as well as the associated ditching and minor culvert work that would be associated with that. For bridges, the lifecycle management strategy includes rehabilitation activities that would be expected to take place over the course of the asset's lifecycle, as well as the ultimate replacement of the structure at the end of its useful life. For facilities, the lifecycle management strategy embraces the recommendations provided by Dillon Consulting, who did the detailed condition assessments, and look at the individual component rehabilitation and replacement needs. And finally, for vehicles and equipment, the lifecycle management strategy is based on the expected lifecycle of each individual asset and reflects the fact that these assets wouldn't typically have a major rehabilitation associated with them, but would be fully replaced at the appropriate time. So the lifecycle management strategies document the lifecycle activities, as well as the decision logic that is generally followed when determining which lifecycle activity is most appropriate given the current condition of the asset and its typical lifecycle path. The costs associated with the various lifecycle activities have also been identified in Chapter 3 of the Asset Management Plan, and this is one of the aspects that will need to be updated periodically to reflect the actual costs observed in the market. So ultimately, the lifecycle management strategies enable us to quantify the average annual lifecycle costs for each individual asset. And that in turn allows us to understand the total lifecycle cost across the entire asset portfolio. And this average annual lifecycle cost is what should be budgeted for to ensure that the level of service targets can be achieved. And this doesn't mean that this is the amount that will be necessarily spent on capital in any given year, because there may be years where the capital needs exceed the average. And on the flip side, there may be years where the capital needs fall below the average. And this is where the capital reserves play an important role as a stabilization mechanism. Budgeting for annual transfers to capital reserves that are consistent with the average annual lifecycle cost will result in fully funding the assets and ensuring long-term financial sustainability. And then in years where capital needs fall below the average, there will be an accumulation of money in the capital reserves. And conversely, in years with relatively high capital needs, the township will have the ability to draw down those reserves instead of having to increase the tax levy by a large amount or having to defer capital and potentially negatively impacting the levels of service. So in total, the average annual life cycle costs across all of the assets total just under $2.1 million annually. And this represents approximately 3% of the total asset replacement value. And that leads us to the financial strategy section, which is chapter 4 of the asset management plan. And that financial strategy was developed by looking at the level of capital funding that is built into the 2020 budget. And then it looks at a 20-year forecast to examine how the life cycle activities would be funded over that time frame. One thing to note here is that while the regulation only requires a 10-year forecast, we have looked further out to better assess the longer-term sustainability of the proposed financial strategy. The detailed tables in Appendix B of the plan provide the full details of the forecast and include a projection of the operating costs, which are based on the 2020 budget and adjusted for inflation in out years of the forecast. And then in assessing the appropriate level of capital funding to be built into the township's tax levy, we have also looked at capital funding amounts that are expected to be available through senior level government programs such as gas tax and the OCIF program. The financial strategy that was developed ultimately seeks to achieve a sustainable level of capital funding by 2026. And as detailed in the report, this would require annual tax levy increases of approximately 6.6% annually over the next 6 years. And then these increases would potentially fall to approximately 3.5% annually thereafter, basically to keep pace with inflationary pressures at that point and moving forward. Now, in undertaking the financial strategy, we also considered the impact of future assessment growth in the township. And based on historical averages, the assessment base was assumed to grow at just over 0.9% annually. And with this assessment growth taken into account, the expected impact on individual tax bills would be an increase of approximately 5.5% annually for the first 6 years, and then followed by increases of approximately 2.6% for the remainder of the forecast period. One final note here is that if the township is successful with securing other funding sources through either grant programs or potentially other user fee revenues, then these tax levy increases could be reduced, at least to some extent. And additionally, if there are operating cost efficiencies that could be achieved by maintaining the assets in a state of good repair by following the lifecycle management strategies that have been identified, then this would again have a similar effect of potentially reducing the magnitude of the tax levy increases that would be required. And so finally, that brings us to the recommendations section of the asset management plan, or chapter 5 within the report, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, but there are a number of recommendations provided. Firstly, for council to consider adopting and approving the asset management plan, as well, I think importantly, to consider the asset management planning information through the annual budgeting process moving forward, and then also to update the asset management plan as needed over time. So there is a minimum requirements to update the asset management plan every 5 years. That's given by the regulation. But I think the underlying information will likely need to be revisited and refined year to year, as both the actual physical conditions change of the assets, which we can only predict to some extent within a plan. So to reflect those changing realities, there will be some updating of the underlying information that needs to be done, as well as to, for example, update the costs that have been utilized in developing the plan and the financial strategy, because those will also change over time and not always just with inflationary adjustments. So there will be updates required to the underlying information, and then at least every 5 years, there will need to be a comprehensive update of the plan itself. And so that summarizes the overview of the asset management plan that I was hoping to provide you with this morning. And I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the plan, or to hear any general comments in this regard.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. It's a big document to read with, I don't think there were any surprises in terms of condition assessments from my perspective. I think the numbers were maybe a bit of a surprise. And certainly the levy increases that are proposed are very different than our historical increases. So we'll have to get our heads around that. I have a couple of questions, but I'm gonna put it up to council first to see if you have any questions of Peter that you wanna get clarification on. Anybody have any questions? Councillor Dayu.
I do. I have 3 questions, and thank you very much for the overview, which has helped me to prepare the Coles notes in my mind of the large document. So that was very helpful. My first question of the 3 is, may I clarify? I believe you said that facilities have not been assessed in terms of the regulations they have to meet, like bridges and roads have been assessed in terms of those regulations. Did I understand that correctly?
So maybe just to clarify that a little bit. So the facilities were assessed based on industry best practices by Dillon Consulting. What I was indicating is that within the asset management regulation, there is no prescribed measure to measure the level of service being provided. So the regulation for items like roads is very specific in stating that municipalities have to report the pavement condition index as one of the level of service measures. So there is no such prescribed measure when it comes to facilities.
Thank you. That surprises me a little bit, because we've been caught off guard. I have been caught off guard in the past about, for example, accessibility regulations. Station 70, Fire Hall, we've been doing a lot of work on it in the last number of months. I see on page 2-20 that there's a replacement value of about $2,000 for plumbing there. But if you look at what the project has cost us to replace the plumbing while bringing it up to sort of a universal accessibility standard, which we've been made to do, then it doesn't reflect what's in the asset management plan. So I'm just, I'm concerned that there might be other areas where things like accessibility are going to catch us off guard when we look at the proposed replacement value of some of these items. Do you have thoughts on that? And then I have another question as well.
Absolutely, and I think so. There will always be sort of these changing, maybe regulatory requirements or very specific needs of individual assets that go sort of beyond what we can reasonably anticipate with the life cycle modeling that's undertaken. And that's why, as I alluded to towards the end of the overview, it is important to recognize that this asset management information will need to be updated and will need to rely on staff's expertise and judgment in understanding what some of these additional requirements may be. So the condition assessments were very thorough in looking at the condition state of the individual component parts. But to your point, there might be other considerations that may be in addition to what's reflected directly in the asset management plan.
Great. May I continue with my
Sure, you may as well ask your third one. Go ahead, please.
So in that same vein, did you take into consideration expected growth of either the township or service levels in the township? Again, I'm on page 2-20, looking at the township garage, which is at the very bottom of the page. And, you know, when I go into that township garage, I think, wow, there's a lot more that's required here in order to meet the prospective growth of what we want to provide for our tax-paying citizens. More equipment over the years. We've had lengthy conversations at council about replacing the garage full stop in order to meet that growth demand. And of course, that isn't reflected in this document. So I wonder, and I know I appreciate your point that it's up to staff and council to review and change as we go forward. But I wonder to what degree has prospective growth entered into the assessment?
Thank you for the question, and I think that's an important one. So while the asset management plan is typically primarily focused on looking at the needs of the assets that are currently supporting service provision, again, to fully embrace or understand the pressures that may exist on the facilities or other assets for that matter, resulting from further development in a municipality, typically that's addressed through more of a master planning process to understand in light of that anticipated, for example, population growth or whether that's permanent or seasonal population growth, what are the additional service demands that growth is going to place on the infrastructure, and then through the master planning exercises where those growth related needs would be addressed holistically. And then once that information is available, it can be incorporated as a sort of layer on top of the asset management plan to look beyond the assets that the township currently has. What would be these additional things that need to be considered in light of that future growth?
Okay, so we should consider this document almost like a bare bones minimum of what is going to be required to finance change over the years to come in that sense, rather than using it as the template. There's more, or a couple layers more that we're going to have to add on. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dayu. And I saw another hand a few minutes ago, and I'm not sure where it was. Other members of council with questions of Mr. Simcisco. Councillor Berry.
Hi there. I noticed in one of the appendix near the end there, just before Appendix C, there's a lot of information about the reserve funds. And I just wonder, how does the reserve funds fit into your study?
Thank you for the question. So the reserve fund is sort of considered within the financial strategy as again, somewhat of a stabilization mechanism. So what we're trying to determine through the asset management plan is what is the amount of capital funding that should be built into primarily the tax levy in this case, to support the ongoing life cycle needs of these assets. Now, recognizing that there, again, may be years where the actual capital projects that may need to be undertaken may exceed that long-run average of the funding within any particular year, the reserve fund acts as that stabilization mechanism that the township should be able to draw on to sort of mitigate any immediate tax levy impacts. But then conversely, in years where there may be relatively low capital needs in terms of replacement and renewal of the assets, that's where that money that's being budgeted for in terms of this capital funding could be contributed into that reserve to offset future life cycle needs. So we've taken that view that the reserve fund is being utilized and shown within the financial strategy as this stabilization mechanism that accumulates money in some years, and then there are draws on that reserve fund that would be shown in other years. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Lisa, if you want a little bit more clarification, feel free to ask. You're going to think about that for a minute. Any other questions from other members of council at the moment? I have found that my questions have more or less been answered through the conversation that's just been undertaken. Julie Shortreed, Councillor Shortreed, go ahead, please.
Just to follow through with Lisa's on the reserve funds, when you were doing your calculation for tax increase, did you take into consideration what we already had in reserve? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Madam CAO, did you have anything you wanted to mention or ask at this point?
I don't think so at this point, no.
Okay, well, I mean, you've been involved in the whole process from the beginning. You know, going forward, there's a lot to think about. We are required to approve the plan, and we were talking about this earlier. I'm just going to circle back to the clerk. Are we obligated to approve it today, or we may as well, I suppose, because it's not like we're going to change it. So, you know, we'll see. The Treasury and staff will manage this plan going forward. We'll certainly see it in our upcoming discussions, being projects and priorities and budget, and we can certainly have our own further conversations about the implications. I mean, the potential levy increases are quite substantial, as I mentioned, in comparison to our historical attempts to, you know, do a good job of keeping the levy increase to, you know, 1.5% where possible. This is definitely building blocks for, you know, future investment in the community. But I think Councillor Dayu makes a very good point that it's notwithstanding any changes that we feel we need to make in terms of, you know, anything new or bigger or more. But it certainly is an eye opener in terms of the capital investments that will be needed to simply maintain what we already have and keep it in good working order. But I am pleased that we are primarily green. We are primarily in the good section right across the board, with not a lot of things that need immediate replacement. I think if there's nothing further at this juncture, then I will ask for a mover and a seconder to receive and approve the asset management plan, knowing full well there's lots of discussion still ahead. Do you have a question, or are you moving, Deputy Mayor? You're muted, so I can't tell what your answer is.
No, the only question I would have had is whether or not we did in fact need to approve it today, because I think that I heard Peter talk about, you know, us having a look at and strategizing, but you know, I see that we might just as well approve it today, and look forward to our discussions and would move the adoption and approval.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in terms of approving it today. It's not like the five of us are going to have a conversation and change any of the content. We paid money to have the experts provide the content. What happens with the content afterwards is certainly up to us as a corporation and a council. So I have a mover in Deputy Mayor Danielson. Do I have a seconder for this plan? Councillor Barry.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council receives a delegation from Peterson Cisco, manager of Watson and Associates Limited, regarding the asset management plan, and further that council receives and approves the asset management plan as presented.
All in favor? That's carried. Mr. Cisco, thank you again for your presentation, and we'll bid you good day.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. All right, up next is number 8, building and bylaw enforcement business. We'll bring in the CBO for that. Good morning, Mr. Rogers.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Just one report for you, just monthly activities. We were speaking just before the meeting, and you said it's been very, very busy. So
For you, Mayor, yes, it's extremely busy, keeping Greg and I out of trouble. One of the things I find discouraging, though, is the number of people we're finding building without permits. But I know the leaves come off, and now all of a sudden we can see what's been going on. So we are following up on those. So.
Well, and we need, you know, we keep talking about enforcement, and we've got a lot of decisions to make around how we spend money, and we've just received a report that has an awful lot of money already expended for us. So certainly bylaw enforcement's an issue that doesn't go away. Are there any questions of David from council members on his report? Councillor Dayu.
Not a question so much as a comment. As I look at the construction permit revenue comparisons 2019 to 2020, you can sort of viscerally remember the confusion of society as you look at how numbers went up and down compared to last year, based on this year's month by month, and it's been quite the year. You can just tell from these stats alone. It's been quite the year. So well done to the department for hanging in there and making it all work.
Thank you for that. Anything else from council? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Councillor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council receives report BLDG 1720 regarding monthly activities for the month of September 2020, submitted by David Rogers, dated October 15th, 2020.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, David.
And with your permission, Mayor, I'd like to be excused from the meeting. I have a few inspections to get to.
By all means, please take care of business for us. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Number 9 is Parks, Recreation and Trails business. So we'll bring in Mr. Card. Good morning, Mr. Card.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
We have your monthly activity report. I'm sure equally as busy as David has been, or I think equally as busy as every department has been. So what are your highlights for us today?
Just this past week, we're going through final review phases on the Dorset Museum. So it's good to see that coming to a close, just some finishing touches and finalizing acceptance on the permit process. Hardwood Landing, same process, putting the finishing touches on that. And then as far as recreation and trails operations, here we are moving into the fall, getting ready for winter. We continue to be busy with attendance, an increase of 88% over last year for the month of September. That's all relative to the backcountry canoe routes camping program and the water trails. A few other projects we were able to complete, replaced the outhouse vault privy at the Little Hawk Lake Landing in conjunction with Public Works, which will also help to facilitate a couple more parking places over there. And rest business as usual heading into the fall.
We talked last time about how busy you thought the trail system and might be through the wintertime, and you were expecting the uptake to continue through the skiing and snowshoeing season. And yesterday at the Committee of the Whole, County Council recommended that the Winter Hiking Festival continue as planned. So we might see, we're hoping to see, everyone's confident that that will continue through the winter season. So good luck to us all there. Are there any questions of Chris for his report on his monthly business? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive his report? Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives report PRT 1820 regarding monthly activity report submitted by Chris Card, dated October 15th, 2020.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Item number 10 is Public Works business, and we'll bring in Mr. Thorne. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, everyone.
A number of reports for you. First up is the airport fuel usage report. Are there any questions?
Really,
go ahead.
Sorry, nothing really to report. Just a little lower than usual, but yeah, things are still going well down there.
Good. Any questions from council about fuel usage? May I have a mover and a seconder to accept that report? Councillor Shortreed. Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Sharp-Reed, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that Council receives report AP 1020 regarding the September 2020 fuel usage submitted by Steve Dewey dated October 15th, 2020.
All in favor? That's carried. Second item is just the amended funding agreement for the Stanhope Library Accessibility Project. If you want to speak to that, please, Adam.
Yeah, so as we move forward into this project further, the date that we had previously had set for in November of 2020 will not be met. So we've asked for a second extension, which will push that to the May 31st of 2021.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. I'm glad we weren't sure about that, so I'm glad that those projects are getting the extension. Are any questions about this from council? May I have a mover and a seconder to accept this?
It's in the bylaws.
It's in the bylaws. So we're not going to do that. Monthly activity report for you is next.
Just like everyone else, super busy trying to get year-end projects together and start on to our winter operations. The only thing I would like to, I guess, really point out would be that the completion of the Stanhope Museum, the exterior roof was finished earlier in the season, and then now the paint, the exterior paint of the building has been completed. So we'll be moving into the next phase of that project for window replacement into 2021. Other than that, it's status quo for us. Just keep working away.
And the other departments, you're just as busy. Are there any questions of Adam on the monthly activities for Public Works? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Short-Reed and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Sharp-Reed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, Council receives report PW 4820 regarding monthly activities submitted by Adam Thorne dated October 15th, 2020.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Next report is the proposed project list under the Environmental Assessment Act. Some changes that are coming, and we'll see if there's any questions about that. But Adam, if you want to take us through that.
Yeah, so this report is just basically for information purposes. At this time, we do not have any recommendations for comments, and we'll see how things unfold with the EA process. And if there's comments to be made later on during the process, we would be bringing that back to council for further discussion.
Yeah, it's a November deadline, isn't it?
It is for this round, yes.
And so I would ask members of council, is there any questions that that might require some information to come back in terms of possibly providing any input to the process? And of course, remember, the proposed changes are on the public record, so anybody in the public who can read the document and make their own submissions. But Councillor Dayu, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to state for the record my continued deep concerns regarding the paper and the process. I feel the environment could be put in jeopardy if there is no environmental watchdog that is there to ensure that many of these changes are not going to steamroll the environment into submission. I also am concerned about the fact that the Ontario government is asking for the input of public on what should be considered an appropriate project to submit to the environmental assessment process. I think that's a little bit like asking the British public whether it's a good idea to leave the EU or not. These are not things that an average citizen would have enough information on to be able to assert an informed opinion on. So I'm concerned with this continued process, and we'll continue to keep a watchful eye. I do have one question. I don't know if Adam, you're able to answer it now, or whether it's something to take back. It's regarding part 2 of your report, or of Melissa's report, which is page 12 in the discussion paper. I'd be interested to know when it comes to part 2 orders, will they be focused exclusively on Aboriginal rights or issues pertaining to provincial importance, or simply more on Aboriginal treaty rights? And yet the general public will still have an ability to opine on issues that matter to them, like the sightline or the Blandings turtle habitat, or whatever it might be that they are concerned about locally. That would be my one question for consideration for, as this process moves forward.
Well, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to speak to that currently right today, but I can take that note down, and I could bring back something or I could send you something further on to provide a bit further information on that, if that's what you would like. But we definitely can keep that in mind, and as we move forward, if something triggers that conversation, we could definitely bring that forward.
Yeah, that's great, Adam. I think about our recent concern here in Algonquin Highlands about Harvey Lake and the aggregate work that Bacher wanted to take place and will be doing close to Harvey Lake. And I know that they, the Harvey Lake folk had some concerns there, and were happy that they were able to submit those concerns as part of the Part 2 process. So yeah, it would be great to make sure that facility remains in place.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments, Councillor Barry?
I just wanted to add that I'm quite happy to see in number 9 asking or saying that they're now wanting to see municipal support for landfills, and I just wanted to say I'm happy to see that. I wonder if that had anything to do with all of our correspondence with having the right to decide for municipalities to have input in that.
Yeah, I think municipal voices there are important, and I don't disagree with Councillor Dayu in that that very often the provincial government's process for consulting is exactly as you've said, where it's an opportunity for the public to provide input. But you're right, the average person doesn't have the knowledge to be able to contribute usefully, because there's just too much behind it. There's too much tech sci behind it. So that remains a challenge in terms of public consultation. So we'll leave that. Adam is going to look up is going to get some more answers for Councillor Dayu on the one question, and I'll look for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillors Barry and Dayu, please.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved that Council receives report PW 4920 regarding the proposed comprehensive environmental assessment BA project list submitted by Melissa Murray dated October 15th, 2020 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Lastly, for you, Adam, is the ULinks funding application with a quick turnaround. Deadlines next week.
Yes, unfortunately, sometimes when these funding opportunities come up, they do have very short deadlines. But essentially right now is what they're looking for is support of the application. And currently our commitment needed at this time is very minimal. If we do support their application, we would definitely see some more plans come ahead where we would have more input on what kind of work is involved for staff and how that would look moving forward. The goal here for us would be to, if council chooses to support this, would be that when they bring forward their ideas of support, that we would be able to sit down with that and look through it, and then go from there on what kind of support we can provide, whether that's staff time or maybe some information regarding whatever project they're looking at.
Yeah, and I do, you want to support these kinds of applications, and I'm happy to agree to this to meet the deadline, but I think it needs far more detail in terms of logistics and how it's actually going to work. I mean, the idea of the water festival of enhancing the climate change awareness, that's a great idea. That's a standalone. But supporting municipal efforts to educate the public, well, we have a committee that's part of their mandate, and support how. So we have to make sure that any ULinks projects don't report to to a committee. And so that's what I mean around the logistics. And then there's, you know, the organic waste issue that currently lives at the province. So I'm a little confused as to how how ULinks is going to help us when we're just waiting a direction from the province on it, all very, you know, legislative in nature. But I'm assuming this application or a request is being made to all the municipalities, which is great, and there'll be hopefully some collaborative work. But I certainly look forward to hammering out some of the further details on the logistics, just to make sure we don't have people stepping on toes or cross-pollination in the wrong places. Thoughts from council on supporting this application? Lisa Berry.
No, I support the application. I think it was nice to see that Algonquin Highlands seemed to be highlighted in our efforts to date. One thought was when they mentioned the Children's Water Festival reaching over 1,200 students per year, my question kind of goes to COVID, and I wonder how that will change. But other than that, I support it in principle.
Yeah, I think they're probably just moving ahead with their plans as written, and will modify as they need to, like many other organizations and events have done as well. Any other thoughts from council on this? May I have a mover and a seconder to move it along? Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives report PW 5020 Community-Based Climate Change Action Project submitted by Melissa Murray dated October 15th, 2020. And the council supports ULinks in their submission of proposal for funding as identified in the said correspondence.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. That concludes your business with us today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Next up is fire services business, so we'll just bring in the chief.
Good morning.
Good morning, chief.
Good morning.
A couple things for you. Your monthly activity report is first, if you want to take us through some of your highlights there.
Sure. So we actually had a fairly busy September with calls, quite a few medical calls. And really, as I keep saying in all these monthly reports, we're getting back to a regular routine. But right now we're focusing a lot on the training that we put aside. So a lot of weekend training going on, first aid training, and we're finishing up on the recruit class from last year.
And the recruit activities are still happening countywide?
That's correct, yeah. So our recruits are traveling to Haliburton to do some of the skill sign off, and also we've done some of it here.
Okay, any questions from council on the activity report? Okay, and then there's also the response report and the Wi-Fi. I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of that. Okay, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the fire chief's report? Councillor Dayu and Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved that council receives report FD 1420 regarding monthly activities submitted by Jonathan Welker dated October 15th, 2020.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Finance business is next. And I'm assuming, yes, Jeannie's got quite a report, so she's coming in. Good morning, Madam Treasurer.
Good morning.
First up for you is the consideration of expenditures for the Safe Start Restart funding.
Yes. Thank you. I have a report here on July 27th, 2020. The government announced they had secured $4 billion in emergency assistance to provide Ontario municipalities with financial support. And it's being released in two phases, 50% in phase 1 and 50% in phase 2. And Algonquin Highlands has now received our funding for phase 1 and in the amount of $275,900. It's actually in the bank. So we brought this to the EOC for discussion. In the meantime, we have been tracking, charting, and tallying all of the costs that we have incurred in relation to the pandemic since its inception. And I've charted the information for council's consideration. Basically, we've already incurred approximately $215,000 in expenses in relation to COVID pandemic costs. These being bank interest losses, investment interest losses, penalty and interest losses, because we're waiving those for taxes at this time. And then various revenue losses throughout the different departments. And then also included in this chart is the added expenditures that we've incurred in varying departments for supplies and materials, wages and benefits for overtime and or self-isolation and so forth. And so as I said, it's about $215,000 to date that we've spent of operational money, basically. So we've come up with some ideas from the EOC that we talked about with regard to COVID. One of them being remote readiness. We kind of struggled at the beginning of this because not all of our staff are have laptops for their use. We managed to find some, and the county helped us with that, I believe. So we have suggested that we might consider purchasing a laptop with SIM card capability. And to explain that, currently when we work remotely, we have to use our phones as in many cases, our internet. So when the phone rings, we may lose our connection. So if we got a SIM card capable laptop, that type of situation would be avoided. Another option is the cellular modem. And then the other consideration was that internet is not great everywhere up here, as we are all aware, and whether or not to install cell booster systems for those staff that would be affected by internet, so that we are remote ready again should we be deployed back to our homes. So the total for the remote readiness is about $3,500. Further discussions went on to health and safety equipment with regard to the fire department. In particular, right now we send all of our bunker gear out for cleaning because we don't have an existing washer that's functioning. So we were suggesting the purchase of a washer, which is about $5,000. And in light of the pandemic, there are filters now that can be applied and adapted into our existing SCBA masks that will protect our firefighters when responding to calls. And that was approximately $8,760. The other option or the other consideration is the improvement of the HVAC system at the Dorset Rec Center. This is something that has been recommended by the province to help with the circulation within the building, and Dorset Rec Center has been in need of this type of situation or improvement for years now. We are investigating that option right now, and the staff are working with an engineer. And so far we are looking at a cost from anywhere from $25,000 to $300,000 for this project, depending on the option that council so chooses. So the other options was to continue the contactless service delivery options within the landfills, and those and maybe using the restart funds for further improvement that way. So in summary, we are looking at, as I said, about $215,000 to date. When you add in the projects that are being suggested, and not including necessarily the service delivery, because we are using modernization funds for that, we have about another $60,000 worth of projects that would complete the stage one funding dollars. And we're not finished the actual day-to-day costs are going to continue to be incurred during the duration of the pandemic. So we are looking for council's recommendation and discussion on these items and direction as to how you would wish to proceed with these suggestions for the Safe Restart funding.
Thank you for that. My question that I neglected to ask the other day was for the remote readiness, is that how many, is that just for one system or is that for more than one?
At present, it's for one laptop. With the SIM card capability, they're a little more expensive, so they're about $2,000. If we choose to just do the cellular modem option, which is a stick that you just put into the existing laptops, they're very minimal, $100. And then the cell booster system is $1,000 approximately. These are just approximate costs from the IT department.
Yeah, sure. I guess because what I'm wondering is, you know, if there's a need for people who are at home to stay home, where does this one SIM capable laptop live? Like who gets it if there's more than one person? There's more than one person, staff person, is there not, Madam CAO, who has challenges working from home?
There are, but the person, Jeannie, actually is the one that has had the most challenge. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, because everyone's
Kind of fuzzy,
frozen on my screen.
Speaking of challenge.
Yeah, and so because of her internet challenges, which are also cell challenges, she's not able to hotspot from her phone or get sufficient internet. So that has forced her to work most of the time in the office. So everyone else has managed with their phone. So, you know, given the cost of this type of system, it was felt that at this time one would be sufficient. Everyone else has a laptop and can hotspot.
Okay, thank you. And I know it has been a struggle, and I'm just gonna just go off topic slightly. Jeannie, hopefully you have submitted your location through the county's request for internet connectivity challenges, and there's a place for comments and wherein you could say, I may live near Kinmount, but I work for Algonquin Highlands and I can't work in the county because of the internet challenges where I live. So they need to know that too. But just because the project is Haliburton based doesn't mean doesn't affect people who may be connecting to us from outside the area. But anyway, just a little aside there. So this is the first one. Council's thoughts on the remote readiness proposal for in this regard. I see Jen's hand first, and then Liz.
My question isn't about the remote readiness, so I'm happy to wait until.
Okay. Yep. Deputy Mayor Danielson, you're on remote readiness, are you?
Yes. I just remind me, if you would, Jeannie, what the dates are within which these expenditures must be made.
The initial dates are not limited. These are all pandemic related expenditures for the phase one. So we're continuing to incur costs for the COVID related pandemic at this time. So there isn't really a date. The phase one funding was provided to help offset these costs, but there's not really a restriction on a date.
Okay, I just thought maybe there was a time frame within which you must use phase one and then they would go to phase two. I was a little bit concerned about depleting the entire amount of money, given that we don't know exactly what the time frame is, and these recommendations do pretty much do that. I don't have any issue with the laptop acquisition. I wonder if we can, I know that at some point in time, we're going to have to justify our expenditures to some extent. So I mentioned this to Mayor Moffat, and I was just a little bit worried about justifying or tying the need for the washer for the bunker gear to the pandemic. you know, but if you're confident that we can do that, I guess that's all right. I'm just a little bit worried about depleting the entire fund if we don't know, you know, how the next phase is going to roll in.
So let me just back up then. So I'm not hearing any concerns with the remote readiness issue. Is that the whole 3,500 or part of it? What is council? I don't see great gnashing of teeth. So I'm assuming that that's to accommodate a senior staff member to be able to.
Absolutely. Yeah, no.
Okay. Okay, then so health and safety, we're down to the fire services and the washer. Keep in mind, we already have the dryer. We already possess the other half of it. It was bought by the association a number of years ago. So, yeah, so it's the washer. And I don't know, is it possible to, can we bring the chief back in for a minute? I have a question for him.
I was actually going to ask if we could keep him here to address this.
Sorry.
Oh, welcome back. So we're on the, I'm assuming you've been listening in the background there. We're on the Safe Restart funding at the health and safety section, which is where the proposal is for the filters for SCBA and also the PPE washing machine. And I was just saying that we already have a dryer. It was purchased by the association a number of years ago. My question, and I think Deputy Mayor Danielson has one as well. My question is there an opportunity, who else has these? And is there an opportunity to share out the use of this machinery with our neighboring fire departments who must be facing the same challenges?
So I'm aware Minden has a washing machine that they've said we could use. Again, it's the logistics of having to transport dirty gear outside of our area.
Okay, and Deputy Mayor Danielson has a question as well.
I don't have any issue with the masks and the filters. I think, you know, I can see definitely tying that to COVID and that being absolutely necessary. And to be honest, I don't really have an issue with purchasing the washer. I can see that that's a reasonable thing to do. I'm just concerned about how we tie that specifically to COVID, because this is COVID funding.
Chief, can you reply to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can. Basically, I guess my response to that would be this is becoming industry standard to have for departments to have their own washing machine and to have their own individual face masks. And it's definitely become a greater push during COVID.
Chief, is it not the case that we send our bunker gear out for cleaning? Is it being sent out more often for cleaning because of the increased number of calls and medical calls, and that this would just be an in-house solution as opposed related to COVID? I think that's what the Deputy Mayor is looking for, is that we're about being able to tie it actually to COVID. It was my understanding that because there were more calls and more concerns that firefighters are wearing bunker gear as their protective equipment attending COVID calls, or anybody who screens positive for COVID, not necessarily having tested, and that we are then cleaning them ourselves. Is that accurate, or did I make that up?
No, that's definitely accurate. We'll send gear out whenever it's exposed, and but now also too we have reusable gowns that we're needing to wash. So yeah, we're doing a lot more washing at this point. By my calculations, that machine would pay for itself within 2 years, based on the cost of sending the gear out right now.
Well, and less handling by fewer people too. Okay, that does it for me. That responds to my concern.
Any other questions or concerns about the two proposals for health and safety equipment? Councillor Barry?
No, I support the remote readiness. Just a question about the washing machine. Would what is being purchased? Would that be as good as what we're currently using when we send it out? The
Yeah,
service.
so this is,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Chief.
so this, sorry, yeah, yes, Mayor, this is a commercial washer extractor, so it would be the same type of machine that would be used when we send out the gear.
Yeah, it's not a domestic top loader.
No, I didn't think that. I just wanted to make sure that it was as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you, Chief, for coming back on.
Thank you.
So the next question is if council supports the idea of improving the HVAC at the Dorset Rec Center and then having staff come back with some more details on that, because we don't know. And we've had a little bit of information given to us previously, and this would help finalize or get us closer to knowing the full number. You know, we have the rec center is closed, the gym is closed, and you know, it's a main feature for the community that can't be used at the moment because we don't have, you know, we're not confident in our ability to keep the air moving as required by the province and in the face of the pandemic. So looking for thoughts from council on what you'd like to do around HVAC, pursuing HVAC. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I'm really quite pleased to see this. I think that it's absolutely key that particularly in this building, that we look at an improved system. My concern is it's a pretty wide range for costs, but my concern is when we're looking at HVAC systems, because we've been hearing through the news that there are some systems that in fact worsen the spread of any possible germs or virus in the air because it's the wrong kind of system. So I just think we need to be really careful in making sure that that we get the best system for the concerns that we've got, and even if it does mean that we've got to go to the top end of the estimate.
Yeah, absolutely, and it will be very interesting to see what options come back to us. I'm seeing council concurrence, so lots of exploration yet to be held, and I'm thinking we can all imagine that the best solution for HVAC improvements at the rec center are going to far exceed, even if we didn't spend the restart money on anything else. I'm sure it would far exceed the money that's left. So we're going to have to find it somewhere. So we'll have the operations manager come back with some more details as they unfold, so we can have a look at that. And then the service delivery improvements. Future improvements such as this could be related to the safe restart, but I think we spent all the money. So, and we're good now. I mean, the Oxtongue landfill system is going to be open next 18th, I believe. So that will then the landfills will all be touchless. Councillor Barry, and then Councillor Dayu, and then Deputy Mayor Danielson. Go ahead.
Yes, Jeannie, did you give a date on when the estimated other 275,000 would be available?
The other 275,000 we have to apply for before the end of October if council so wishes. Having said that, I did sit in on a webinar in reference to that, and we have to have exceeded our initial phase 1 funding, and capital projects at this time would not be considered for the phase 2 funding. And they're looking at everything with regard to reserve status and everything about the township financially. It is actually my recommendation that we wouldn't actually qualify for phase 2, but it's council's direction or decision on that.
And there are a number of municipalities, I think we saw that in a previous correspondence list, that are lobbying the government to open up the restart money to capital, because there's only so many boxes of disinfectant wipes you can buy, but there's a ton of capital improvements that are required to keep communities safe, and we'll have to wait and see if that lobbying has any effect on phase 2. Mm-hmm. I've lost the order of the people. I think it's Councillor Dayu and then Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a bit of a hindsight question because I suspect there isn't an answer for this moving ahead for phase 2 that would justify us applying for phase 2 funds, but I throw the idea out there anyway. When it comes to service delivery improvements, I know that a couple of our departments have been at a bit of a stranglehold because they haven't had enough staff to be able to be flexible enough to continue certain services to the degree that they wanted to. And I just raise as an example, Parks and Rec, for example, it was very hard to gear up to get those water trails ready once we got the go ahead to open them, because there was all of this prep work that had to be done and we needed to get the staff in place and et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder with the benefit of hindsight and knowing what you know about the limitations on this sort of funding, is there scope for thinking about applying for a phase 2 on the off chance that we go into a phase 2 or 3 of COVID, it gets worse, and having that flexibility of staff to bring in more people when we need it in order to keep certain services flowing would be a benefit for us. Is there anything within that realm of thinking that is worthwhile taking forward?
What are the treasurers of the world saying on something like that?
I kind of would struggle with that too, because we did have staff that we had to let go from varying other departments during COVID that could have been redeployed, and they actually, some of them chose not to. Not to say that we couldn't hire more people. I'm sure Chris would be happy to get more people to help with the PRT trails. But I would struggle. I'd need Chris's expertise to know if he could consider extra people or how that would work for his purposes.
Well, but let's not forget that Public Works is on the edge of being overwhelmed. So is the planning department, because real estate and land use transactions are extremely high. You just heard David excuse himself from the meeting because building and bylaw is going crazy too. So yeah, let's be careful not to focus on one department when all of ours, right across a number of municipalities, are facing external pressures right now.
Indeed, and that was very much just an example of the kind of flexibility that I meant, but certainly not only focused on that department. No.
And I don't know if I guess it would have to be, again, going back to Liz's question around the washer, is, it has to be tied to COVID. And so, we know we heard from Adam Thorne earlier that in the year that things were taking 2.5 times longer than normal because of the cleaning protocols that all staff had to undertake between and among each other when they were using equipment and using vehicles and things like that. So I don't know if that's perhaps the treasurer could ask around and just see if other municipalities are facing those kinds of same pressures, and if there's any belief that could be accounted for. Keep things moving. I think we're going to find at projects and priorities, which is only a few weeks away, that despite having achieved a tremendous number of things this year, there's a number of things that aren't done yet. And it's because of having to slow down work processes to accommodate cleaning protocols. So does council wish to have the treasurer look into that? Or yes or no? Mayor Danielson, I think you're next. Anyway.
Well, I wanted to comment on that particular concern. I think that there might be cases where we have to let people go, also cases where we might have to add to staff, and just referring to the conversations that we had at the county yesterday. In fact, we have recommended to county council that there be additional staff hired for both public works and planning, and at a minimum, definitely COVID related. For the reasons that Mayor Moffat just said, the increase in planning requirements, the concern that public works staff might become ill and we wouldn't be able to cover snow plowing for the winter, which is absolutely crucial. So it's definitely something that is being considered by other municipalities, and we could consider as well. I did have a question about Do you consider that the HVAC is capital or improvements to operational?
It could be considered capital, but for the initial stages money, the phase one, there wasn't that implication on, it wasn't limited to strictly operating. It was a combination of things. It can be kind of go both ways because it is operating. We can't operate it, you know, we're not open because we don't have sufficient. So it kind of relates back, but going forward, it's not.
I don't know that we should preclude ourselves from actually applying for money that might be considered capital, because I really believe that there is sufficient push on the province. I know that it was one of the big issues from the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, that be something that be considered. Just as an example, council chambers, when you're looking at greater separation, there's many council chambers across the province that can't accommodate that. You know, we might be able to for the small numbers that we normally have, but that's definitely capital costs, and that's one of the prime examples that's being used. So I don't think that we should negate ourselves from considering capital opportunities.
In case it changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I just want to interject there because you're right. I sat on the meeting yesterday at the county and I'd forgotten that. So you're right. There is a staffing component to the money that the county is going to expend in this regard. And I do know that.
Terrible.
Sorry?
Well, and it's a considerable amount of money.
Oh, considerable. Yeah, sorry. I thought you said Carol, and I was thinking, yes, I'm here. It is considerable, and we are facing pressures in some of our departments that have legislated timelines and requirements attached to them in terms of plowing and planning. So, you know, there are a couple of things that we could consider as well. And if there is change in the capital requirement, then you wouldn't want to be. I always say we want to be looking at it, not looking for it. Councillor Barry.
Just wondering, with the HVAC, is that the only facility that was considered, or like I wonder, is the administration office, is that have a suitable HVAC? Because right now there's a lot of people working there.
I would defer to the CAO for that. I think the answer is yes, but the CAO is going to tell us about that.
Yeah, we have a sufficient system here. And the reason specifically for the fitness room was because in order to open it, we have to have ventilation in there. So that's why it was specifically selected.
Yeah, and the thing with the Dorset Rec Center is it has nothing. So it's a big box with some windows in the gym, but the fitness room that's in the basement is basically a cinder block square. So with nothing, I think the way to move the air around in the fitness room is with fans, which is also highly frowned upon at the moment. So it's about making sure there's proper air circulation so that it's safe for people to use. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
On the service delivery improvement, a portion of the report, I'm just wondering if we haven't looked at the possibility of having contactless pay options for the office, or do we already have that?
Yeah, and so it's funny that you say that, because I know one of the things in terms of our greater conversation that we have yet to hold around communications, we have found that that from staff comments that the public is quite happy to pay online and deal online and talk to people over the telephone. So part of that is, I believe that staff are looking into sort of a shopping cart where you could go onto the website and you could, you know, buy and pay for your building permit and whatever else you might need to pay for. And so there's some costs there, and that's all designed to keep people away from, you know, from coming in and out of the office very often. So I don't know if you know, website design is considered capital or just operational improvements so that we can facilitate touchless pay systems and improved services in that regard. So that's another one that could work. I'm writing them all down. I'm writing down website pay options.
And we are looking into further online options simply through the bank. Right now, you can pay your taxes online, but there is a possibility of simply opening that up to a general receivables type of situation as well for like building permits and stuff as a first step, and then moving forward from there as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's some value in a little more consideration. What's the deadline for applying for round 2?
October 30th, we have to have the report in and council motion.
That's actually the information that I was asking for in the first place. I guess
My
I
apologies.
no, I guess I just didn't put it out clearly enough. I'm glad that Lisa asked.
Oh, okay, that's what you were asking. Okay, so
It reduces my concern about you know, expending all of the money at this point. If we can reapply, you know, at the end of October, then I'm not as concerned as I initially stated about the you know, expending the allotment that we've got now.
right, well, this is our second meeting of the month, and we don't meet again before the 30th. So we would need to have a special meeting in order to have a look at some of these things if there are opportunities to continue to provide you know, better services to the public and use the COVID money because it's related to it. So okay, so is that what council would like, is for some conversations in the back of the house to carry forward some of these topics and see what we can come up with? I'm seeing nods. Madam CAO, what's your thoughts on that? Do you have what you need? And I've got some notes here too. I'm sure you have lots of notes.
I do. Yes, I do have some notes. I just want to remind council that we still have a substantial amount of money left in modernization. And so some of this that council's talking about, I'm thinking maybe more towards modernization, and also to keep in mind something that Jeannie mentioned is that when we apply for this funding, if council decides to do that, those are things that will be factored in, I think, in the decision making. I know, Jeannie, you had mentioned that the other municipalities in the county have confirmed they are not applying. Isn't that right? Yeah,
that's correct.
So we can certainly put some thoughts together around things that council has indicated, but just to keep that in mind.
So something that, interestingly enough, I did actually write down on the bottom of the page here a few moments ago was we need a report on modernization money and COVID money and the projects, because you know, amounts of money like this don't come along very often. And so if we have needs and we just need to decide where they most appropriately live, if we have more modernization needs than we have COVID needs, then find the things that fit the COVID needs and use that money, and then use the modernization money for other projects. So just another possibility. I see Lisa Berry, but I'm going to go to the CAO first because I'm sure it's related to this. It is exactly that. And Jeannie and I have talked about each of those reports and bringing those to council at the same time. And the timing in that is sort of the critical part, because with COVID, those numbers are still being tallied. So it's a continual number. Right now, the modernization is easier to nail down and bring forward. We were kind of hoping to bring them together so that council could see what project was falling where. And what was your anticipated timeline on those reports? We won't know any final numbers for COVID, at least until the December meeting, at least. But the second round of COVID, the restart money is due the 30th. Mm-hmm. So there's going to have to be a crossover and a bit of a close your eyes and jump at some point. Lisa Berry.
I just remember from Roma, a lot of funding was sort of, it was mentioned that a lot of funding is more accepted when things are jointly applied. Is there an opportunity to join with the county or to join with any other municipalities in something that would be more successful? Has that been thrown out there?
Jeannie, what's the world saying about that?
I'm not familiar of any funding other than the restart funding right now. I haven't heard any other announcements for like a joint situation of that nature. The restart funding, as Angie's already indicated, the county and none of the other municipalities are interested in applying for the second phase. So at this point, we wouldn't have a joint situation.
Councillor Dayu, I saw your hand there. You're on mute.
Jeannie, would you kindly just go back a few minutes and tell us why you believe that, or why you recommend that we don't apply for the other half? What is your rationale there? Because I'm afraid with all these other new ideas coming forward, I've lost sight of why you think it might not be a good idea.
Well, in part because we have very healthy reserves here in Algonquin Highlands, but also because we still have about half of the modernization funding that isn't actually earmarked yet. Some of it has been spent and we're still continuing working on projects, but we haven't earmarked or definitely suggested something strongly for the remaining money. So from a finance standpoint, we're in good stead. So or good stead. So I don't know that they're wanting people to prove that they don't have the money to continue because of COVID. We need to prove that we far exceeded the phase one funding option that were given to us and show that we can spend the second phase. But with all of the funds that we have available to us within our own reserves now, I would be worried that they wouldn't consider us.
Maybe we need to include the 6.57 levy increase in the asset management plan. Like, you know, we may not have, one of the things that is often frustrating is, and this has been a challenge with funding formulas or the way funding's been expended from the province, is it always seems to be a bailout. So those municipalities that are fiscally responsible and want to apply certain funds to continue success and growth don't get money. But if you're bad financiers and you're in the hole, you know, you get all this money. So once again, poor financial management is rewarded and financial stewardship is not. So that remains disappointing. It's been that way for years. Mm-hmm. So Jeannie, from a Treasury perspective, do you think it's too blue sky to talk about staffing and website options or taking a chance on some capital? Do you think we're just wasting staff's and council's time having this conversation, or is it worth? I mean, the fact that other municipalities around us aren't applying is of no interest to me. It doesn't matter. I think we need to do what we think we need to do for us. And you know, if the county has applied to enhance some enhance some staffing capacity because of the delays of COVID, very clearly outlined in the county report yesterday that there were so many delays that I'd almost rather get turned down than not try. I see Deputy Mayor Liz, and then I see CAO Angie Berg.
That's one of the things that I was going to say is I'd rather apply and get turned down than not apply. Although I applaud your approach to financial responsibility and, you know, that we are in good stead. However, it's an opportunity, and I do not believe that the county has made any decision whether to apply or not for further funding.
Yeah, this is just how they're using the first round, which doesn't have those, it has fewer restrictions on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Angie, what were you going to say there?
So and I did watch the county meeting yesterday, and the CIOs had a previous conversation around the additional operators at the county, which is great. I understood from our conversations that, and certainly those operators would, you know, be offered up to the county first, and then, but if another township needed them, they'd be available to the other townships, is how I understood it. So, you know, there is that. Is council looking to have the same type of situation, is to apply for an operator or two and have them on standby or have them available to other municipalities? Just looking for thoughts around that idea.
I think that's probably the idea based on certainly what the county is proposing. I mean, it was just committee of the whole. It hasn't gone forward yet. But Liz, would that be your understanding? Like that's what you're looking for?
Yep.
I mean, Councillor Dayu had mentioned started the conversation by wondering about some staffing potential for Parks, Rec and Trails. And we, if the summer staff have gone, but we know because of COVID, people are having the great outdoor pursuit these days. And so does that mean, is there enough staff in that department? We don't know. Chris said he was thinking of bringing the report forward. So I think there is some opportunities. If there's going to be a tremendous increase in any of our departments because of COVID related delays in projects, supply chain demands or challenges, anything like that, that's going to put undue pressure on our ability to provide services or opportunities to the public, then seems to me that we could ask for the money for that. It's related to COVID. They could say no. You could say yes. Councillor Dayu, you look like you're thinking about something, asking something.
I am. I guess it's probably pie in the sky thinking. But I'm kind of envisioning a bit of a flexible pool because there are just so many unknowns moving ahead. We don't know if we're going to get into a third or fourth phase of COVID. We don't know what's going to happen with the staff. There might be some people who won't feel comfortable in their positions moving ahead, and it just feels like if there could be a pool of flexible funding for flexibility with how we work with staff, that would be great. But if I think about it from an administrative perspective, I mean, that's a nightmare thing to try to administer from the donor's perspective. So it really is with that flexibility in mind, rather than having an operator on standby or whatever it might be. That's where I was going in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I think the goal with the planning staff person that the county was hoping to get funding for was specific to a proven need of backlog. With respect to roads and public works staff, that's a legislated requirement for plowing and timelines associated with that, and is much more crucial in the near future. And I don't know, to Angie's comment about should all municipalities consider doing the same thing. I think it was the hope at the county that we would, by hiring a couple of extra people, we would have enough to cover our own operations and assist if necessary. But I mean, depending on how bad things get, it's like, where's our crystal ball? How bad are things going to be, or are we going to have problems? I'm not sure that we all need to. I guess that it would be up to Adam to look at his complement of staff, but we don't even know what kind of winter we're going to have. So it's hard to sort through that. I do know that I think all of the other Highlands East, Algonquin Highlands, and the county and Dysart have all agreed, I think, to share when possible. But I don't think that Minden Hills is interested in becoming involved in that at all.
That's my understanding as well. I mean, I think what we can do is we've kind of dumped some pie in the sky ideas on staff, and we, as members of council, we don't have the details. I think our best course of action at the moment is to sort of pitch it back to staff and let the CIO have conversations and see if they genuinely believe that there's something that we need that fits. And if there isn't, there isn't. But I don't think there's any point in us trying to figure out what that might be when we have the experts in-house in their own departments who can sort that out. So lots of food for thought there. And I don't want staff to have to go through an exercise in futility just to say we did. But I would leave it with you, Angie, to talk with staff and Jeannie, of course, as treasurer to see if any of this fits in terms of modernization. I mean, even if we can earmark some of the modernization, in the short term. We'll just leave that with you to see what you come up with. If we need a special meeting to move this forward, we can have one, and if we don't, then we don't. Would that suffice for council?
Yep.
I mean, I think it's been a good discussion, and I think, you know, it's our job to ask the questions and see what opportunities are there, and then certainly for staff to make our dreams come true. Okay, so on that, so we've landed where we've landed for the restart funding to date for some needs that are there. I've heard concurrence across the board with a number of questions, so I guess I'll look for a mover and a seconder to approve the restart funding report. I could have some hands, Councillor Gaillou and Councillor Berry.
Just some clarity.
Yes, ma'am.
We're just approving and receiving the report, or are we in fact approving the expenditures because they're not clear?
How do you want to handle that, Madam Treasurer?
Well, the HVAC one is being brought back because we'll need decisions. So council could probably decide if they wish to proceed with the other projects if they wanted to, or that can all be brought back if we go to another meeting, because some of those could be considered modernization. Angie may want to speak to that as well.
I really think we need to tease out the modernization versus the COVID and make sure we're putting the right projects in the right bucket.
Yeah.
So that sounds to me like it's support in principle, pending a little bit more information. Does that make sense? Madam Clerk, how does that sound to you? What does your resolution say?
Well, right now, it's drafted to approve all the projects outlined in the set reports. That would be the remote readiness, the fire department, and HVAC upgrades.
Knowing full well that the HVAC upgrades are coming back.
Come back
for details.
Could we approve all of the other projects and just the HVAC pending further clarification?
Sure. I mean, we could do that. She said the clerk was nodding yes, so we could approve the other projects and support in principle the HVAC improvements pending further details. Is that what you'd like to do? And Lisa Berry looks like she really needs to say something, so go ahead.
I do sort of concur with Angie and the discussion on looking at where modernization fits, because technically, you know, the laptop or the washing machine could possibly fit there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And that's why we need to have a look at some columns to say which one, like the reasons why and which one fits where, so we can, you know, let's say put the right
projects, but we don't know where the funding should fit.
Yeah.
Can we support it that way?
Well, like then that makes it all support in principle, because we're not sure what pot of money it might come out of.
Or does council want to defer this decision until further information?
I'm not sure if council heard that. The clerk asked if council would like to defer this decision pending that further information. No, I'm seeing shaking heads. So it's approval for remote readiness and fire department equipment, and approval in principle for the HVAC upgrades. If we have to change the pots of funding, we can do that. May I have a mover and a seconder for this? Councillor Barry and Deputy Mayor Danielson. Now we'll find out what it says.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, the council will receive report TT 1520 regarding potential projects to be funded from the municipal operating funding phase 1 under the Safe Restart program, submitted by Jean Hughes, dated October 15th, 2020. The council hereby approves the remote readiness and the fire department equipment project as outlined in the said report, funded from phase 1 of the Safe Restart program. And further, the council approves in principle the HVAC upgrades at the Dorset Recreation Center pending further information.
All in favor of that? That's carried. Thank you. And secondly, for you, Jeannie, is accounts payable, but they're all there. Does anybody have any questions of Jeannie on the accounts payable for October 15th? May I have a mover and a seconder for that report? Councillor Barry and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that council has reviewed the expenditures incurred set out in the October 15th, 2020 account summary in the total amount of $2,436,612.01 and hereby approves payment of same.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Jeannie.
Thank you.
We're a little bit late for a break, so if we can take maybe a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back into planning business. So we'll come back here at 11:05, and we'll now go into break. Okay, we're back in live TV land for today's meeting. We're into planning business, item number 14, and so we'll bring in the planner, please. Good morning, Mr. O'Callaghan.
Good morning.
A number of items for you in planning. First up is Committee of Adjustment update, the minutes from the September 25th meeting. If anybody had any questions, I'm assuming they have them answered. So can I have a mover and a seconder to receive those minutes? Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Danielson. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives the September 25th, 2020 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Proposed Shore Road closing allowance closing, my apologies, it's coming back on Big Hawk Lake.
Yes, this is the bylaw to close the Shore Road allowance in front of this property. Council will note there's several parts on this plan which are being closed. No objections were received from neighboring property owners or easements required from any of the utilities that were circulated. Staff are recommending approval of the bylaw as presented.
Are there any questions or comments from council? We will see this in bylaws. Do we need to receive the report, or is it just come straight to bylaws? No, we need to receive the report. Okay, may I have a mover and a seconder? I'm still getting used to the bylaws being at the end because it's the normal course of business. 12 years has been upset, so I get confused. Mover and a seconder to receive this report. Councillor Barry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council acknowledge receipt of report PL 7120 regarding the proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 22, concession 13, geographic township of Stanhope, Mowbray, Big Hawk Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan and dated October 15th, 2020. And the council deems the said shore road allowance to be surplus and concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and directs a bylaw to stop up, close, and convey the said shore road allowance be tabled for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Another one coming back for Halls Lake.
Yes, this is another bylaw to close the shore road allowance in front of this property. I have actually received a letter of objection from the neighboring property owner with respect to the property line and further correspondence from their lawyer since my report was prepared. For that reason, I would recommend deferring this matter until that issue has been resolved, but can certainly answer any questions if council has any at this time.
Any questions at this time, or we'll just wait for the deferral and see it when it comes back? Okay, we will defer. Should I have a mover and a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Dayu. May it resolve that council acknowledge receipt of report PL 7220 regarding the proposed shore road allowance closing fronting property located at part of lot 15, concession 8, geographic township of Stanhope, Warburton, Holly, Halls Lake, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan and dated October 15th, 2020. And that council defers its decision pending further information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is Parish. This is a file we've seen a number of times. It's an unusual file. There's been an unusual amount of, I consider it lobbying on both sides of this application. The planner is in his third round of a pre-consultation report. I know there are some questions and some concerns around this application. We need to remember that this is the pre-consultation for us, and we have ended up and have been asked to get into the weeds of a process that is clearly laid out and where we should not be in the weeds. So just to circle back or to remind council that we are not voting yes or no. If this applicant continues on through the process to the Land Division Committee, we would be circulated as a commenting agency, and if that approval is given at the county level, there's a zoning bylaw amendment, rezoning application that would have to come back to us. So it's not the end of this report for us. What I want to do is have Sean take us through the report again when we have the drawings, and then I'm going to ask council for any questions they have or concerns they have that can be recorded for going back to accompany any application to the county. So I'll ask Sean if you would once again take us through the Parish application.
Yes, I'm sure as council recalls, this was originally, this property was subject to a pre-consultation application for severance in March. That application was rescinded and a new proposal has now been submitted. This proposal is to create one new waterfront lot with one retained waterfront lot as well as to establish a right-of-way over the retained lands in favor of the proposed severed lands. And this right-of-way would only be for access to the parcel, not to access the waterfront as originally proposed in the previous application. The lands are currently developed with a dwelling, several sheds, a dry land boathouse, and a workshop. The applicant is proposing to sever the lands, resulting in the dwelling and the shed being on the severed lands and the remaining structures on the retained lands. Now, one note on that, because there is no principal use on the proposed retained lands, I am recommending a condition be included that a principal use be established, and they would have 1 year to establish that. And again, just noting the right of way in favor of the proposed severed lands would be for secure access to the existing cottage on the proposed severed lands. The end result of this severance would be 2 separate properties that do comply with the minimum lot area requirements of the zoning bylaw. The proposed severed lands will meet the minimum lot frontage requirements. A planning application, such as a zoning and bylaw amendment, will be required to rezone a portion of the retained lands in order to recognize a reduced lot frontage, as well as to rezone a portion from rural to shoreline residential 2. The existing dwelling on the proposed severed lands will also need to be recognized through a zoning bylaw amendment, as it will be located 3.46 meters to the easterly side yard lot line, where 6 meters is required for a new lot. Staff are supportive of the application with the reduced frontage. That is outlined in my report, but specifically because there are policies in our official plan which support where there are increased areas that a reduced frontage may be considered. And I feel in this case, this proposal would fall under that policy, as well as any new development on the proposed retained lands would need to meet the 30-meter setback requirement from the high water mark. So for those reasons, I'm recommending approval of the proposal.
Okay, so what I want to do is, I know I have a number of clarifications and questions, and I think other members of council do as well. Deputy Mayor Danielson, go ahead, please.
I like to see the conditions that you have added to this, Sean. However, notwithstanding the size of the property to be retained, I still would like to register my concerns about the reduced front water frontage. You know, given all that the work that we're trying to do to protect the lakes, that the new regulations that are going to be coming into place, I remain very concerned about that. The other thing that kind of concerns me, and I think this is in line with Ms. Poirier, one of Ms. Poirier's comments, are the number of accesses onto the property. I understand the need for the easement for access for the adjacent property owners, but I really am having a bit of difficulty with the other accesses that are being provided or are already in place. It's just a concern, and my concern is, given the size of the large retained parcel, the possibility of those accesses or rights of way, laneways, whatever you want to call them, to lead to further development applications.
So the existing access points, the first being, I guess, moving from left to right over four-wheel drive, that's where the proposed easement would be to the severed lands. The gravel driveway in the middle where it goes to the workshop, that was a driveway that was approved for access. So the retained lands would have 2 access points, being the gravel driveway, as well as Triple Creek Drive, which both currently exist. Any future applications, I mean, they would have to be evaluated on their own merits. Unfortunately, I can only deal with what's being proposed at this time.
And so my question then is similar, is the easement in favor of the easement that's B7, which is four-wheel drive, is that still proposed to be the driveway access to the severed portion? Or is the driveway to the severed portion going to be the gravel laneway off Foshgun Lake Road?
The access will be where the proposed easement is over four-wheel drive to the severed lands only.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it just seems strange that the applicants live on Triple Creek. And I don't understand why there needs to be, I don't understand why the severed lot can't have a right of way across the retained lands in the existing driveway loop instead of creating another access off a four-wheel drive. I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, well, so with Triple Creek, it travels over several private properties. So it'd be several applications for a new right of way. Whereas if they utilize four-wheel drive, that's only one parcel of land, being the proposed retained lands that they would require the right of way approval over.
Well, and the applicant already owns those lands, so that. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
So it's my understanding that we're not actually making a recommendation one way or the other. We're making comments. Is that correct?
Yes, at this stage.
Go ahead.
At this, I guess all I would want to say then is that I would want our concerns, or at least my concerns, noted. Accepting that you've responded to them, they still remain concerns of mine, and I understand that's part of the process. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So what we had decided to do, what the clerk is going to do is take note of the comments or concerns of council, and she may need some time to craft that to make sure that it's captured correctly. So there may be a bit of a delay here. My question to you, Sean, is the same question I had asked previously in regards to the section of policy 5.2.6.5, where circumstances may occur, and may, of course, is the operational word there, may occur where reduced requirements are appropriate and desirable. And I had asked previously, I'm looking for your fulsome explanation of how this is appropriate and desirable, given that ultimately the waterfront is non-compliant. This is the part I'm struggling with. And I think I already know what your answer is, but let's say it out loud anyway.
No, that's a fair question, and it's certainly open for interpretation. And when I look at this policy, I see that they note specifically in it where you have a larger area that a reduced frontage may also be considered. In this case, the retained lands greatly exceed the minimum area requirements. Further, because there is no principal use established on that lot, any principal use would need to meet the 30-meter setback requirement and be well set back from the lake. And also, I'm also recommending an environmental impact study be completed to further reduce any potential negative environmental impacts resulting from this development. The frontage is deficient. It is, however, only deficient by 4 meters, I believe it was. If it was a greater number, say 50% reduced from what would be required, then I would struggle with something like that. But based on the information I've seen with this proposal, I was comfortable with recommending approval.
Okay, and my secondary question, which is sort of a side question, is that policy 5.2.6.5.5 that contains that language, is that our policy, or is that language that's directed by the province?
I believe that was our language.
Okay, yeah, I think there's a number of deficiencies. Did we determine about the side lot line? Did you say that was in there? Did I not read that?
Yes. So the side lot line, the existing dwelling on the severed lands will be 3.46 meters from the side lot line, where 6 meters is required for a new lot, which this would technically be. So they will need to have that existing setback recognized.
Okay, so there's a number of, so where my challenge is, it just feels like there's so many there's so many deficiencies that would need to be recognized. It almost feels like we're just working way too hard to make this work. And I fully respect the whole idea that the purpose of land use planning is that deficiencies can be corrected. So we condition people into compliance where needed to keep things moving forward. But I struggle with a number of these things, and I especially the part that the larger retained lands accommodate or make up for the non-compliant waterfront, and I really struggle with that. Just given the amount of work we're trying to do with shorelines and waterfront and healthy lakes and whatnot, and I presume that your answer back is going to be that it's not an at capacity lake, and that and yes, the planning process allows for deficiencies to be corrected. So I think my comments are that the frontage is too small, and that there are too many deficiencies that need to be accommodated to make this work. I think those would be my two comments. And I'm looking for comments or questions of clarification from other members of council, if you have any. Councillor Dayu, you're a bit dark there. I can hardly see you, but I do see your hand. So please go ahead.
Sean, question for clarification about the establishment of a principal structure on the retained lands. You said that it should be established within a year. Would you kindly tell me what that could include? What is that definition of a principal structure? And if there had been an intention to put a principal structure on, would that have already shown up in the application, or would that not have been present in our notes so far? I wonder if this is a brand new thing for them, or if they had been intending on doing it and it just wasn't part of the process where we're at right now.
So the first question, of principal use would essentially be, in this case, a dwelling would need to be constructed on the property. If that is a condition of approval, you have 1 year to fulfill those conditions that are attached to a severance application. So that's where the 1 year timeframe comes into play. In the previous application, a principal use also would have needed to have been established because they were creating a new lot.
Okay, so basically we're asking them to put on a dwelling where they hadn't already considered putting a dwelling because it hadn't been part of the previous application. To our awareness, they didn't have that as within the plan for the upcoming year. And then could dwelling mean like a 10 by 11 shack with a bit of insulation, or like how do you set the bar on what a dwelling is in cottage country, where for a lot of folk dwelling is literally a 10 by 11 shack with a bit of insulation in it?
Yes, so the dwelling that would need to be established on the property would need to meet the zoning bylaw as far as minimum dwelling size, which is currently set at 74 square meters, I believe it is, which works out to roughly 800 square feet or just under, as well as all the setback requirements, lot coverage requirements, building code requirements. Those would all need to be met.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
With respect to the dwelling on the retained land, there is an older cottage. I just want clarification that they're not going to be able to use the argument of using the same footprint for a dwelling. Should that go ahead?
You mean the severed lands?
Pardon me?
Do you mean the severed lands, the existing the existing frame cottages? Yes. On the to be severed?
Yes.
Yes, so it is an existing legal non-complying structure, and those provisions of the
could you tell me
the zoning bylaw would apply. So
if
they were to demolish the building, it
sorry,
could
Liz,
not
can you
be.
hang on a second? Sean, you were a bit frozen there. Can you finish explaining about the existing dwelling? And Sean, is
closer to the water than the current dwelling, or at least 15 meters, whichever is greater in that case.
So once again, Sean, we missed, or I certainly didn't hear half of what you just said. I could see your lips moving, but I couldn't. There's a song about that, but I couldn't hear what you were saying. So can you explain that again, please?
He's frozen.
He is frozen. Sean, could you turn off your video and we'll just listen to your voice? Oh, good Lord, we've lost him completely. We'll just wait a minute for Sean to come back in. There he is. Except he's frozen. So Sean also needs to fill in that County of Halliburton internet thing. Sean, are you back with us now?
Hello.
It's like the early days of cell phones. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Sean, can you hear me? Yeah, Sean, if you could turn your video off, and maybe that'll get some more juice into your audio. Well, procedurally, what do we do now, Madam Clerk? Our planner is frozen.
Maybe take 10 minutes and try to get him to call in.
Mm-hmm.
John can hear us.
Sean, can you hear me?
Sorry, I seem to have a bad connection.
Okay, so we're going to take 10 minutes and get Sean sorted out. Maybe we'll get him back in either just on audio or by telephone. So we'll just hold this conversation. So we'll take a short recess while we try and get the plan back. Well, he's back.
We lose connection again. Sean.
Hello.
Are you there?
No.
Oh, don't say anything bad.
I'm going.
Just ask him to call.
Yeah, Sean, if you can hear me, you're gonna have to call in. So we will take a quick recess while we get Sean sorted out. So everybody can just hang tight.
I'm going to try calling in.
Good idea.
Sorry. Hello.
Oh, can you hear me?
I'm.
Can someone please send Sean a text? We hear him, please phone in.
Oh, he got it. Okay.
He's still there. He's the guy we need to not be there, and he's there.
I think he's going to talk. And still be on the screen.
Sean, can you hear me? Side lot line.
Yeah. Frontage deficiency, side lot line, number of accesses. That's what I have so far.
I believe we are back in business, and Mr. O'Callaghan is joining us by phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello. So Sean, you were in the midst of explaining, in responding to Deputy Mayor Danielson's question about the existing frame cottage being allowed to stay in the same place, and I think you were saying that yes, it can. I think that's what you were saying. So can you finish up with that?
Yes. So the dwelling, if it were to be demolished, it could be rebuilt, provided it's no closer to the water than what currently exists, or is at least 15 meters, whichever is greater of those two. The same would apply to any additions that were proposed to that building. So I guess in summary, it would still enjoy legal non-complying status and the provisions that are attached to that.
Does that answer your question, Liz? You're on mute.
Can you tell us what the setback of the existing cottage is at the moment?
Yes, I just need to zoom in on the survey.
Yeah, I couldn't get in close enough. I couldn't zoom in close enough to see it, so.
Yeah, and unfortunately with my internet acting the way it is.
Looks like 20-something, 0.117, but I don't know what the second number is.
Well, that would have to come to the Committee of Adjustment at any rate if that was being proposed, correct?
That is correct. If it could not comply with the provisions in place, yes, a Committee of Adjustment or minor variance application would be required.
Okay. All right, that's good for now.
Okay, and any other questions or clarifications required or sought by other members of council? And I suppose the high water mark falls in the same category as where the existing cottage is. That it would be and that may be another. Liz, do you want that added to the list that it's one more condition? It's just another of many conditions that needs to be included. Councillor Barry, you're on mute.
Sorry, Sean, you said that Bosch Kong Lake is not at capacity. How often is that revisited? I was reviewing the recent septic reinspection mapping of phosphorus. I just wondered, how often is that reviewed? How does that work?
Typically, it would be reviewed at the official plan review stage. But if we received information from the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Natural Resources, we could always specifically amend the OP earlier than the legislated timeline to include such a lake.
Okay.
Okay, so is there anything else that council wants to include for this to move forward to its through the proper process? So what I'm going to ask is if council supports the conditions that Sean has provided and the comments that have been, the concerns that have been expressed. And I'm going to have to ask, I'm going to actually let the clerk and the planner have a conversation about the language about what this looks like. Can you ask Sean what you just asked me, because it's outside my wheelhouse?
Yeah, so Sean, depending on council's decision, whether they go with your recommendation to support it in principle, along with the 10 conditions, and then add their concerns to the bottom of it, or should council choose to not support it and only list the reasons why related to the concerns, would the 10 conditions still need to stay in the motion because it's still possibly going to the Land Division Committee?
That's a fair question. I'm not sure I have the exact answer. If council wishes to not approve the application in principle, then they could list the reasons why, which we've gone through. So I guess, are you asking if we should include conditions as well in case the application does go forward to Land Division Committee?
Yes.
And I think it's important that if the application does move through the process to the Land Division Committee, that the conditions that Sean has put on the application need to be retained, because that's the purpose of pre-consultation. So can it be council supports or not supports? I guess well, it's not approving because we're not the approval authority. I'm looking for the wording of council. What's the verb? Council supports in principle the application with the conditions attached and council's comments or concerns with it.
Yeah, we could do that, because typically what happens is I would include my staff report as well as the council resolution to the applicant, who includes that in their application submission to the county. So if the resolution stated the reasons or the concerns that council has, then county would receive those as well. I guess the other thing is,
Sorry, go ahead, Sean. I apologize.
no problem. I was just also going to say that if council does not support the application, they are certainly within their right to recommend or not recommend the application. That would still be considered pre-consultation comments, so the applicant could still submit the application, at which point it would come back to council again as a formal application at that point.
Councillor Dayu is patiently waiting with her hand in the air.
Could we not receive for information only and then receive it for information, include our comments, pass it on to the approval authority, because it isn't us. So I feel a little uncomfortable saying one way or the other whether I approve on something that isn't mine to approve, but I can certainly receive for information. But I'm not a planner. I don't know how these things work.
Sean, what's
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
We're following proper process. I mean, each township has its own process, but by council providing a resolution either in support in principle and providing that to the county is certainly within the scope of what's permitted to occur with these applications. There are different methods that are used by other townships, but this is the one we've been using and it is acceptable.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Along the same lines as Councillor Dayu, I'm just wondering if we can't in fact receive the planner's report and recommend his conditions and offer our concerns as follows. Do we have to say that we support or do not?
I don't believe we need to.
Okay, so the resolution can say that council, say that again, Liz, that
we receive and acknowledge the report and recommendations of the planner, and offer additional comments as follows. Or
yeah. So we'll just wait for a few moments while the clerk.
I'm still unclear whether we need to list all of these conditions.
Yeah, because the conditions need to go. So we want the conditions and our comments to be resolved. We do our business. We undertake our business by resolution. We don't undertake our business by, flowery notes. Madam CAO.
With respect to the retained lands and the rezoning to SR2, and the condition is to recognize the deficient lot frontage. I'd like to recommend, and Sean, hopefully you can comment on this, but I'd like to recommend that council consider adding an additional clause to that, and that no further development be permitted on that retained land.
Further development being severing of the lot?
Mm-hmm. I know we've done that in the past on a number of different severance applications when they require rezoning.
Yep. We could include it in the severance agreement for sure. The zoning, I'm not sure. We would have to recognize the frontage as exists or as being proposed. So any future severances wouldn't meet that frontage requirement.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is we want to make sure that we provide the appropriate amount of information into the process of which, this tertiary discussion is just the first step. I can only speak for myself. Should it be a question of just, I think, why we're trying to make the make the language lay on the page the way we're hoping. If I were asked if I support the application, I don't. But it's not ours to decide on. It's someone else's to decide on. So I think Liz's suggestion is the best, that we acknowledge the planner's recommendations and additionally include our comments into the appropriate process.
Can I just highlight? So the additional concerns are the number of accesses to the property, the frontage deficiency, the side lot line of the existing dwelling doesn't meet the permitted setbacks, and that there will be no further severances be permitted on the retained lands. Those are the additional comments.
I suppose, and that again, it's just a comment. Mine is that there appear to be a significant number of deficiencies that need to be accommodated. I just feel like it's being shoehorned, is what it feels like.
We want to take a short recess.
Okay, so the clerk needs some time to recraft a resolution that reflects this conversation. So we are going to go into recess just for a few minutes, and just stand by. The screen will change to recess while she crafts, and don't go away. We'll be right back.
It is absolutely raw up here today. Is it raining miserably where you are as well? Wow.
We are back live. Welcome back. The clerk has crafted the resolution. What I'd like to do, instead of her reading the whole thing multiple times, the conditions are the conditions as applied by the planner are the conditions applied by the planner. So Dawn will read what she has captured as council's comments or questions. And if those are correct, then we'll get a mover and a seconder, and then she's required to read the entire resolution, which is quite lengthy. So Dawn, if you would just go over what you heard for the comments.
Yes, thank you. The additional comments would read as follows. And further, the council provides the additional comments. 1, concerns with the number of accesses to the property. 2, concerns with the lot frontage deficiency on the retained land. 3, concern with the side lot line setback deficiency to the dwelling on the severed lot. And 4, no further severances be permitted on the retained land.
Is there anything else that council wanted to have recorded as its thoughts on this matter? Okay, then may I have a mover and a seconder for this resolution? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed. And it is quite lengthy, so Dawn will have to, we'll settle in while she reads.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of planning report PL 7320 prepared by Sean O'Callaghan and dated October 15th, 2020 regarding proposed severance of lands located on part of Lot 10, Concession 5, Geographic Township of Stanhope, located on Boschcon Lake, submitted by Robin and Constance Parish. And further, the council acknowledges the planner's recommendations as follows. 1, payment of taxes, including penalty of interest. 2, portions of the proposed retained lands to be rezoned from rural RU to shoreline residential 2 SR2, exception to recognize deficient lot frontage. 3, the proposed severed lands be rezoned from shoreline residential 2 SR2 to shoreline residential 2 SR2, exception to recognize a setback from the north interior lot line. 4, a copy of the draft reference plan be submitted to the planner to the Township of Algonquin Highlands for review and comment prior to the registration of the plan. 5, settlement of parkland dedication or cash in lieu in the amount of $1,000 for the severed parcels shall be paid to the Township of Algonquin Highlands pursuant to Section 51(1) of the Planning Act. 6, the principal use being established on the retained lands. 7, current driveway of the proposed severed lands being stopped up along the proposed boundary between the severed and retained lands. 8, an environmental impact assessment being completed by a qualified professional. 9, the registered owners are to submit a site development plan showing the proposed lot prepared by the Ontario Land Surveyor, OLS, and based upon any recommendations of the environmental impact study, and which will identify the proposed docking envelope, driveway location, proposed septic systems, and all buildings and structures, main and accessory, within the required setback areas. And 10, the registered owners are to enter into a severance agreement pursuant to Section 5126 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 to address any recommendations of the environmental impact study and site development plan. And further, that council provides the additional comments. 1, concerns with the number of accesses to the property. 2, concerns with the lot frontage deficiency on the retained land. 3, concern with the side lot line setback deficiencies to the dwelling on the severed lot. 4, no further severances be permitted on the retained land.
You've heard that. Any further comments from council? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, next up for you, Sean, is your report on the on Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices Act. Where is Sean?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
Could you hear me, Sean? I was just introducing the next item, which is Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act.
Yes, I could hear that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yes, this is a report based on some changes that were made through Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act, specifically related to development charges and some changes to the Planning Act. So as council is aware, the county has been going through a development charge background study. So any of these changes would be implemented into any new development charges the township would have if the township moves forward with development charges. And there was a note about community benefits charge, which is a new a tool in the Planning Act. However, unfortunately, there are several exceptions to a community benefits charge, and any development within Algonquin Highlands would likely be exempt from it, specifically related to any building that's less than 5 stories is not eligible for a community benefits charge. So I don't see any development in the near future that would exceed 5 stories at this point. Another note is parkland bylaws. There were some minor changes to that section. However, it's my interpretation that our parkland policies continue to comply with the Planning Act. But if there are any questions, I'd certainly be happy to answer those.
Are there any questions from council on this report? To just be received for information as keeping our eye on the changing landscape. May I have a mover and a seconder for it then, please? Councillor Thayu and short read.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council received report PL 7420 submitted by Sean O'Callaghan and dated October 15, 2020 regarding Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice Act.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up for you, Sean, is an application or is the report on the deeming bylaw. Or
yes. Yes, this is a deeming bylaw that's required as part of a shore road allowance closure in order for the lands to actually merge with the original parcel of land, because they are a lot on a plan of subdivision. So it's a technical bylaw just to essentially allow the lands to merge. And I would recommend approval of the bylaw as presented.
Any questions for council? Okay, may I have a mover and a seconder for the report? Councillor Barry and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, Council receives report PL 7520 regarding the deeming bylaw of lands located at Part Lot 4, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Stanhope on Cushaw Lake, Sheedy, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan, dated October 15th, 2020, and the council directs the deeming bylaw be tabled for consideration during its regular meeting.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. Next up for you again is a closing application on a Little Hawk.
Yes, this is the initial application. It would appear a majority of the building and sleeping cabin are located on the Shore Road allowance. So I would recommend this application proceed through the regular steps to close that Shore Road allowance.
Thank you. Any questions from council? May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Barry, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council hereby approves in principle an application made to stop up, close, and convey the Shore Road allowance fronting property located at Lot 20, Concession 10, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Little Hawk Lake, Sloss, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the Shoreline Road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you, Sean. Oh, is it Burnett is next? Sorry, one last one. No, that we just did that. Hawk Lake. Is that what we just did?
Little Hawk?
No, this is.
This one, and we got to do Big Hawk is Burnett.
Big Hawk, right. I'm sorry, I put the line through the wrong item on the agenda. So just the last one for you, Sean, is on Big Hawk.
Yes, that's right. And this is another application. Again, the existing dwelling is located entirely on that Shore Road allowance, and I would recommend it proceed through the regular steps to close that.
Okay, questions from council? May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Shortreed and Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that council hereby approves in principle an application made to stop up closing of the Shoreline Road allowance fronting property located at Part Lot 19, Concession 11, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Big Hawk Lake, Burnett, and that the applicants are requested to proceed in accordance with the Shoreline Road allowance closing procedure.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. That's it for you, Sean. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties, and thank you for your patience.
Yep, no problem. Have a good day.
All right, thank you.
Next up is external boards. There really aren't any because nobody's meeting. Just want to check in with the deputy mayor in her capacity as the warden. Is there anything new and exciting on EORN that you want to tell us about? You're on mute.
Sorry. No, there's nothing new to report at this time.
Okay, thank you. Correspondence, did anything get supported there? No. Just in the correspondence, I just want to acknowledge that in the to be received for information was a letter from the Chamber of Commerce about municipal procurement, and just to acknowledge that we've seen that and that our procurement policy is coming forward in the new year. So Jeannie has seen that, and other municipalities are making some changes there as well. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Barry and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved that council receives the correspondence listing for the period of September 25th, 2020 to October 8th, 2020 for information.
All in favor? That is carried. Next up is bylaws. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the bylaws, pass the bylaws? Councillor Barry, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be received and read first time, considered, read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 2020-88 to stop up closing of a part of the original Shore Road allowance in front of Lot 15, Concession 8, Geographic Township of Stanhope. Oh, no, sorry. That one was removed. Sorry, council, I'll have to start again. That was deferred.
Right.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that the following bylaws be read a first time, considered, read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 2020-89 to stop up close and convey part of the original shore route allowance in front of lot 22, concession 13, part of lot 20, geographic township of Stanhope, Big Hawk Lake, Mowbray, bylaw 2020-90 to deem part of a registered plan not to be registered, Cheaty, bylaw 2020-91 to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an amended funding agreement between the corporation and the township of Algonquin Highlands. Her Majesty, the Queen and Right of Canada, is represented by the Minister of Employment and Social Development for an accessible renovation project at Stanhope Library.
You've heard that. All in favor? That's carried. May I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Deputy Mayor Danielson, Councillor Short-Reed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councillor Short-Reed. Be it resolved that bylaw 2092 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings council had held during its regular meeting on October 15th, 2020 be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? It's carried. And may I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Councillor Berry, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that the October 15th, 2020 regular council meeting is hereby adjourned at 12:13 p.m.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.